The conspiracy theory that Paul McCartney of the Beatles died and was replaced by a look-alike is one of the most persistent rumors of all time. In fact, it's listed at number 4 on Time's Persistent Conspiracy Theories list, which is not a list that I knew existed, but I'm kind of obsessed with it now, and it's lots of fun. You should definitely check it out if you want to learn more about what conspiracy theories don't seem to want to die. The rumors of Paul McCartney's death started in 1966 and continued to crescendo throughout the 1960s. The rumors initially focused on Paul dying in a car accident in London, but as the conspiracy spread, so did the theories about where and how he died. Colleges in particular were hotbeds for spreading the rumors of this conspiracy, likely a sign of the distrust that many college students of the day and continuing in today had in authorities. In fact, in 1969, the Drake Times-Delphic, which was the Drake University student paper, printed an article called "Is Beatle Paul McCartney Dead?", which ran through the supposed evidence of his death, including the famous back cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band album, where Paul is the only Beatle facing the other way. It got so bad that in 1969, Paul McCartney did an extended interview with Life magazine where he talked about the conspiracy theory and how it impacted him, his family, and his bandmates. And in true Paul McCartney fashion, the article was titled, "Paul is Still With Us." This may seem like an odd thing to talk about in a YouTube comic book channel, but we're tying it into June 1970 in the publication of Batman number 222, which featured a story called "Dead Until Proven Alive." And the story focused on Batman and Robin trying to unravel a conspiracy theory about a band that is an obvious allegory for the Beatles, and in which the lead singer in that band is supposedly dead. The early 1970s were a really interesting time for Batman comics. The campy show from the 60s was over, and DC was really trying to transition Batman into more serious storylines. Frank Robin, who I think is really underrated as a Batman writer, had the unenviable task of trying to make this transition from sort of campy Batman to the more serious Batman we would get in the late 70s into the 80s, 90s, and of course today. And this really is an issue. This issue is really a great example of the kind of challenges with that. Bluntly, this is a silly story. But the art from Irv Novick and Nick Giordana is great. And you can see the early formings of what would later be the Dark Knight. The more anatomically correct Batman with a better suit, more intimidating, the great cowl, the great cape, all of those things that would come to define Batman in the late 70s and 80s. They're here in the art. The story just hasn't quite caught up to it yet. So where we open with is Dick Grayson studying at Hudson University, and he's in a dorm room with students who are playing the Oliver Twists, which is the Beatles adjacent band in this story. They're playing the music at different speeds looking for hidden message. This was known as backmasking. It was commonly used by people to look for hidden messages in music, not just with the Beatles, but with other bands as well. And in fact, some bands would hide hidden messages in there. So you'd basically play the music backwards, or you'd play it at different speeds, and there'd be different messages in there. And so it was really these kind of Easter eggs that bands would leave for their serious fans in there. Now, of course, if you're trying to cover up the fact that one of your band members is dead, I don't know why you would leave a hidden message to that effect, but, that's what they're going with here. And in fact, that's what a lot of people did, is they would look for those hidden messages, and that would help justify it. Again, the leader of the band, the Oliver Twist, Saul Cartwright, is the one who's supposed to be dead. So Batman and Robin spend the story trying to record his voice in order to compare it to original recordings. They first try to get a recording of his voice, but that doesn't work because they need to get a sample of him singing. So they pretend to have a birthday party for Alfred, and they have everybody sing. Poor Alfred, he was so abused in so many of these stories. But the Bat computer isn't smart enough to be able to isolate different vocal tracks, so that doesn't work. So Batman and Robin attempt to break into the the Oliver Twist studio, but they're thwarted by a gunman. And in fact, it's kind of weird. Batman and Robin are seriously underpowered in this storyline. They're letting these hippie singers best them left and right. Finally, they confront the quartet, and it turns out that Saul Cartwright is the only one who's actually alive. The other three died in a plane crash in the Himalayas, but Saul didn't want to crush the fans. I guess he really didn't care too much about their families. And the four of them decide they're going to go start a new group called the Phoenix. But I guess we're not going to arrest the people that shot at Batman and Robin or assaulted Robin. It is really strange to see Batman so heavily involved in a conspiracy theory. But I think this is a reflection of the time and the struggle they were having to find Batman's new role. And I think it's an important comic for that reason.